Today we're going to be chatting about all the books I read in the month of September. I read 7 books this month, which is a little bit of a lighter month, but I didn't have a single DNF. I finished every single book I started, and most of the books I've talked about you have seen in one way, shape, form, or another already, because most of these were for book clubs or for read-a-thons or for videos I was doing. It was not a very varied month for my reading. I'm calling it my September slump. It wasn't a bad reading month, but I was just a little slumpy. I wasn't putting out as much content. I wasn't reading as much. It was just a little busy. So today will probably be a little bit of a quicker wrap up since we have fewer books to talk about and I already have shared my in-depth thoughts on most of them, but let's just jump on in. As always, we're going from my least favorite to my most favorite, and my least favorite this month was Gerald's Game by Stephen King. This was our buddy read for the Losers Club read-a-thon, which I co-hosted with Beth from Beth's All Booked and Elizabeth from Reading Riley. This year was our second year doing the Losers Club read-a-thon, which is a Stephen King themed read-a-thon that we do for a week during Stephen King's birthday. And this year, Gerald's Game was our buddy read, and it was just not for me in every single way, shape, and form. The premise of this one sounded really interesting to me because it is about this couple, this husband and this wife, and they're going off into this cabin, and he handcuffs her to the bed while they are getting intimate, and then something goes wrong, and then he ends up dying, and she is stuck handcuffed to the bed in the middle of nowhere, and it becomes a survival situation. And you know me, I love survival thrillers, but I did not love the writing style or the pacing of this one. It didn't feel like it was moving fast enough to keep me as engaged in the survival situation. It felt like Stephen King was taking a really long time to say certain things, and certain scenes were just going on and on and on. And I'm like, okay, I get it's realistic and that it's supposed to like frustrate you probably, but it just didn't work for me and what I'm typically looking for in survival situations. And also this book has heavy themes of sexual assault that were just not something that I was interested in engaging in super far in the book. So it just really didn't work for me, which was a bummer since it was our buddy read. But if you want to hear more of my thoughts on it, we did a book club discussion on my channel, so I'll have that video linked below. I also talked about this book in my reading vlog I did for the read-a-thon, and we also watched the movie adaptation of Gerald's Game as our movie watch, and I talk about that in both the book club discussion and in my reading vlog, my experiences with the book versus the movie, if you want to hear more about that. Next up is a book that I gave 2 stars, and that is The Stranger Upstairs by Lisa M. Matlin. I also read this one during the Losers Club read-a-thon, so you can see my full thoughts about it in my reading vlog that I did. This is a story about this woman who has bought this old house and she is planning on renovating it, and then threatening situations start to happen. Really, a lot of the danger is around the community does not seem very receptive of her, and it seems like they're withholding secrets from her. When I was going into this book, I was expecting this to be spooky and to have horror elements, mostly because it's called The Stranger Upstairs and because she's like renovating a house. So I thought it would feel gothic and spooky, and is there a ghost upstairs? Is there an actual person upstairs? Is she the stranger upstairs? Like, what is happening? But this book ended up spending a lot more time focused on, one, just the main character's spiral into disaster. Really, she's just a mess who's falling apart. And 2, the kind of like neighborhood drama, suburban drama aspect of it, where it's like, oh, everybody's kind of like hiding a secret, what went on in the neighborhood before she lived there. And the writing style also just didn't really do much for me. I didn't like the main character, and you're stuck in her head, and I didn't like that I didn't like her. Sometimes I don't like characters, and I like that an author made me not like a character, but this one I just found to be really annoying. So it was not a win for me, and I would caution you, if you're going into this book, don't expect it to be a spooky horror book. Expect it to be more of like a suburban thrillery drama, and then hopefully that sets you up a little bit better for the expectations of what you're getting yourself into with this one. Another 2-star I had this month is Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. This was Gabby's book club pick for the Booktube book club, and I was a co-host along with Marcy from Marcy Reads, so I'll have that video linked down below if you want to watch back our full discussion on the book. We talk about it non-spoilery, and then we dive into spoilers, so if you want to hear all of our extensive thoughts on the book, you can go check out that video. This is a story about this this baby who was stolen 20 years ago, and now in the present day, someone has been murdered in a care home, and you're following 4 POVs, and somehow those events and these people are connected. All in all, this was much more of a mystery than a thriller, which is fine. It just wasn't exactly what I was expecting. I thought there were too many POVs, and the book didn't feel fully developed to me because the POVs are going so fast, and it feels like Alice Feeney is purposefully trying to confuse you, but it was a little bit too over the top for me in terms of confusion, where it took so long to get invested in these characters. I never felt like I was absorbed in scenes. It felt like everything was happening really quickly, and I just didn't feel like everything came together the way that I was hoping that it would. This is a book about complex mother-daughter relationships, which is a theme that I really enjoy reading about, and when I read about that, I really want to see a really nuanced take and a lot of showing, not telling. But this book does a lot of telling and doesn't have a lot of nuance. So that didn't really work out super well for me. I did find the ending to be satisfying. I liked how everything came together, but it is definitely one of my least favorite Alice Feeney's. If you're curious, these are all the Alice Feeney books I've read in the past and how they all rank. This one is definitely on the lower end of the spectrum. Next up is a 3-star read with The Puzzle Master by Danielle Tressani. I read this book in a reading blog I did, reading a couple of speculative mysteries, so you'll see the other one come up pretty soon, but this is one of the books that was featured in that video, so I'll have that linked below if you want to see my full thoughts and experience with this one. In this story, you're following a guy named Mike Brink, who is a savant. He is a puzzle master. He is able to solve and craft puzzles in a way that many people cannot, and it's all because he had an accident when he was younger playing football. He got a head injury and he got acquired savant syndrome, which I'm still not sure if that's a real thing or not, but I just went with it in the book. He becomes this master of puzzles, and he is being called in the beginning of this book to come consult with the psychiatrist who's working with a patient in a prison. There's this woman, Jess Price, who a couple years ago, she murdered her boyfriend allegedly and then has never spoke a word since then about what happened. And Jess keeps drawing these puzzles and things, and that is what got the psychiatrist's attention to pull Mike into the mix. And once he comes in, he is faced with a puzzle he can't solve. This is kind of like an adventure type of book, like an action-y adventure mystery where you're delving into all of these wild different concepts, master conspiracy, secret things going on in the background, things connecting to art history from hundreds of years ago. It reminds me of things like the Da Vinci Code, so if you're into things like that, I think you'll enjoy this one. I did find it to be unique and gripping and intriguing, but the pacing just dragged a bit for me towards the middle and the end of the book, so that is what made me end up just giving it a 3-star instead of anything higher. I tend to find that when mysteries go into this lens of there being this like organized, not crime, but like organized conspiracy things going on, it's like this broader thing, I tend to find that a little bit less interesting to me personally than individuals like lying and hiding secrets from one another and that sort of thing. So it just wasn't exactly my cup of tea, but I did think it was a pretty cool book, pretty fun story. So if it sounds interesting to you, I would recommend picking it up. Next is The Dinner Guest by BP Walter, which I have been back and forth on with my rating for this one. Sometimes it's a 3, sometimes it's a 3.5. Right now it feels like a 3, so we're just gonna call it a 3. This is a thriller book with multiple POVs. You're following the after effects of an incident and the events leading up to the incident and trying to piece together what actually happened at the incident. So the incident is someone was murdered and someone is confessing to doing the murder. The characters involved include this male-male couple named Matthew and Charlie, their son Titus, and then this woman Rachel who comes into their lives and causes a ruckus. I really thought the pacing and the plot structure of this one was super fun. It was super intriguing. You get multiple POVs, you've got the multiple timelines, and it just keeps you on the edge of your seat for so long trying to piece together what really happened and what secrets are people telling. Like, this is a perfect example of the type of thrillers I enjoy when there's multiple people, multiple things could have happened, people are lying, and you're trying to figure out who's telling the truth. Unfortunately, I do think it holds you on the edge of your seat a little bit too long. It takes hundreds of pages before you start to understand things that are happening. I wish a twist would have been placed closer to the middle of the book, and then that would have changed some circumstances, but it keeps you hanging for a really long time, and then I didn't get a great payoff with the very ending once everything is explained. So that's why it ended up being like a 3-star for me. But either way, it was a fun read, and this is my first interaction with this author, BP Walter, and I was checking out a couple other books of theirs, and it sounds like I might pick up more from them either in the future or potentially in their backlist. Next up is My Murder by Katie Williams, which was a 4-star read for me. This is the other book I read in my reading vlog, Reading Speculative Mysteries, so you can see my full thoughts there if you would like. The premise of this one is incredibly intriguing. It is about a woman who is solving her own murder. How is she doing that, you might ask? Well, it is a speculative book. There's a little bit of dystopian edge to it, and I thought this book was really well done, really well written. It was very different from what I thought it was going to be based on the appearance of this and just generally hearing that pitch of it. I thought it was going to be kind of like cute and quirky and witty and cozy in a way, but that is not what this is. It is a heavy, dark, sad book. And so once I got past the first half and realized what the book was going to be, what the tone was going to be, what it was going to be saying, I got a lot more invested in it, and I really enjoyed where the book went. It has some really fun scenes and just like world building elements that came into it that were really unique. And while it took me a bit to get into, I think it went in a really great direction, and I really appreciated what the story was doing. And finally, a surprise of the month was Sucker by Daniel Hornsby. This was also a 4-star read, and I was so nervous to pick this book up. This was my book club for my membership book club, so if you are a channel member at the highest tier, you can go check out that video, link down below. This was our pick for September, and we picked this like months ago before people were really reading it and rating it, and then ratings started coming in, and the average rating on Goodreads is so low. It's like a 3.1 or a 3.2, and I was very nervous. I was like, oh no, what have I gotten my channel members into? What have I gotten myself into? What are we gonna read? Are we all gonna suffer together? I was just preparing for this to be so dull and boring in a book where nothing happened in a horrible time, and I didn't know how I was gonna push through like 300 pages of this story, but I was pleasantly surprised. I had a really good time with this book, and I thought it was really well done. I think where this book goes wrong is it's going to have a very particular audience, and I don't know that it has found that audience yet. It found it with me, but for the most part, it doesn't seem to have found its audience. The way you'll hear this book talked about is like horror, satire, vampires. And when you hear horror and vampires, your brain goes in one direction, but that is not going to be the direction that you're going to get in this book. This is more of a slow burn literary, written by an MFA person, satire on corporate tech in America with a hint, a whiff of vampires. And really more the metaphorical examination of vampires, like soul-sucking corporate vampires. Like think about it in that way, expect that, and then I think you're gonna be set up for a better time with this book. But in this story, you're following this guy named Chuck, who is the son of these really rich, like right-wing family, and he is seemingly trying to break away from that. He starts a record label, and he works in punk music, and he works with all these socialists, nihilist, anarchist type people, and he's really like immersed himself in that scene. But then he ends up reconnecting with his old friend Olivia from college, and she is working in biotech. She's a CEO, and she is looking for some funding for her company, and he is looking for some more money because his label is in debt and he's like not going to be able to make it through. So she ends up bringing him on as a creative and ethics consultant at the company because his parents like write a check investing in the company, and it's a win-win for both of them. And he's like secretly hiding this part of his life from the other part of his life, and then as he gets more involved in her company, he starts to see the more nefarious things that are going on. This book also brings up the comp titles of Bad Blood and Succession. This is a story about like if Elizabeth Holmes were a vampire, but again, don't get your hopes up for like a crazy vampire story. It is a tech satire with vampiric elements. It is a horror story about corporate world, about tech, biotech, billionaires. Like that is horrific in itself, but this is not like a Dracula type of story. Don't expect Dracula. I just really want people to enjoy this because I haven't seen anyone else enjoy it, and I really want it to find the right people, but I did really enjoy it. The main character is horrible, but his voice, like the author's voice, is so sharp, and he's like laughing at that character with you. This book has like an air of pretentiousness to it, but you're in on the joke with the author. And as someone who works in like the tech industry, just the satire version of it was just great. Like on the nose. I thought it did a really good job, and I was so pleasantly surprised because I was really anticipating not liking this one. But I will say a couple comp titles. I think this book had a lot of similarities to The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. So if you liked that, I would recommend checking this out. Things they have in common are the punk aspects, male-female friendships, and this whole element of, is there a monster? Is this a horror story? Are humans the monsters? You know, that sort of thing. It also reminded me of the books Patricia Wants to Cuddle and Florida Woman. So if you like any of those, this might be for you, and I am hopeful that it will find its way into the right reader's hands. So that's it for all of the books I read this month. Like I said, I'll have everything linked below for related videos, vlogs, book club discussions, and whatnot that I have for all of these books if you want to dive deeper on any of them. And let me know down below if you've read any of them and what you think, or let me know if I convinced you to pick any of them up. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!